So hello Achievers, today we are in Santa Barbara with a new awesome guest. I'm sure you know him. He is the author of the best-selling Get Things Done. He is David Allen and he is with me. Hello David.
David, nice to see you. Thank you.
I love your name.
It's a great name. You must be a person of intelligence, sensitivity, and character with a name like David.
I think so. I'll let you to introduce yourself. You will do better than me.
Well, I wrote a book after 25 years of doing this kind of work, starting as a management consultant and then really, for myself more than anything else, exploring and discovering and uncovering what are the principles that allow us to sort of surf on top of our world instead of feel buried by it. And so over the years, I sort of discovered and then build an explicit methodology about how you learn what those principles are and then apply those to your life that are not hard to do, but they make a transformational difference when you do them, both personally and organizationally and within organizations. So I've just sort of uncovered this thing almost in spite of myself. I wound up being an expert in something that has turned out to have very global significance and more is being attracted to people. So, the book has just become essentially a manual for people of all walks of life to be able to then improve their situation without having to transform or change themselves a lot, just applying some simple principles that make it a lot easier to do what they're here to do.
Great. And I would love to listen to your story.
I didn't know what I wanted to do, when I grew up. And it took me until I was in my mid to late 30s to really realize that what I really loved to do was to see how people did what they did and to understand that. And so instead of having my own business, understanding what business was or what the process of work was to be able to assist people in doing what they were doing better and easier. People have often asked me, gee, David, have you always been organized? Now, in a way, that's a misconception about what getting things done is about. Most people think it's about getting organized. To some degree, it's about getting more disorganized because many people are too organized for what they're trying to achieve. And they need to loosen up and blow it up and become more spontaneous and more flexible in their work. But I understand why most people think of this as organization because most people who are interested in this have over-created because they're highly productive and highly creative people. And then they've created a lot more than their own personal systems can actually manage. So the organization part, as we say, bringing up the rear guard, is oftentimes the biggest pain factor and produces the biggest solution for people right away. But to that point, people said, have I always been organized? I say, no. I work kind of messy. I mean, when I cook kind of messy, and when I work kind of messy. It's one mess at a time. But I think being able to have the freedom to make a mess is really your most productive state to be in. But what I've always done was say, how much easier can I make doing what I'm doing? If I'm about to get up and walk out of a room, I think, well, what's the easiest way to get out of the room? I'm not necessarily going to take that way. I say if you know what you're doing, there's only two improvement opportunities, efficiency and style. Efficiency says, look, I could get there a lot easier with less effort so I can use that energy in more meaningful ways. So efficiency has a huge, I'm a big efficiency fan just because I don't want to waste energy, right? But also style. I go, well, that's the easiest way to go, but I think I'll style around that way because that's what I feel like doing, and I want the freedom to be able to just express myself in sort of spontaneous ways. So now, if you said there's only two improvement if you know what you're doing, then those are the things to improve. A lot of people don't know what they're doing, and so that's a big improvement opportunity for themselves to figure that out, like who I'm about, where am I going, what am I doing. But once you have that, then oftentimes just building in the tools to be able to make that happen more easily, more elegantly, with less effort is kind of what I'm about. I've always been wired that way. And apparently not everybody is, because I wound up writing the book. I thought I was the last person in the world to learn this stuff. But it took me, as I say, it took 25 years to figure out what I'd figured out and that it actually was unique. And so that's when I wrote the book, was after all that time and all that work. And I said, wow, I'd better get this into a manual because at some point somebody would figure this out, maybe, but nobody had. And if I got run over by a bus, I wanted to be able to say, look, it's in the book. And you can figure out how to do that.
And it's amazing. Why did you did so many jobs?
Well, frankly, I didn't have a lot of aspiration about success in this world. I was more interested in God, truth, the light, and the universe, and universal knowledge. So I've always been attracted to the invisible because it always seemed to be more powerful and influential than the visible things. It seems like the visible things you and I are engaged in are actually driven by things we can't see. At a more mundane level, how you're feeling affects what you then do physically. But you can't see feelings, they're invisible. What you think affects your feelings. You can't see what you're thinking, unless you're a psychic that can see that kind of stuff. But those are invisible things that affect the visible. So if I could get control of the invisible things, I'm Mr. Lazy. My whole game has been figure out what are the keys to the universe so I don't have to work hard. So if you figure out where are the levers about what really drives this thing, that's why my first job at age 5 was magician. Because I said, look, if I can just move that over there and it moves over there, I go, wow, wouldn't that be lazy? So to me, it was like, how do I uncover what are the things that if we understand them, work them, or whatever, without having to physically work harder, but if we apply those, things occur that improve things. Things are better, things happen. So that to me has always been a driver for me. So I've always been fascinated by looking into that. So it was never, I was never as like, I'm gonna go make a bunch of money, or I wanna be successful, or I wanna be famous. Those were not my drivers. I was really saying, wow, I wanna find out what the core is, what the essence is. Yet early in life, I had, what you might describe as, spiritual experiences or inner experiences where I experienced there is a bigger reality. Wow, and it's phenomenal. And just had little tastes of that. So trying to figure out what that was all about. But that sort of spiritual and inner exploration was something that was actually my prime driver. And still is, actually. It's just the first few years that was more evident, and unfortunately nobody was paying me to do that, so I just had to go have jobs to sort of keep a roof over my head while I was doing the inner exploration. Just turned out that I wasn't stupid, and I happened to like to have jobs that were more interesting, so I wound up in lots of different kinds of jobs, and then discovering that what I was discovering in my inner path actually had some application to the outer world that I was dealing with. So it's kind of a long and complicated story. There was no big strategic plan otherwise than just, well, what's the next best thing I can see to do tomorrow that might be somehow in alignment with what was important to me and what I cared about. So it was almost like following my inner path then led me to a lot of experiences in the outer world that then I began to realize that, wait a minute, the inner path frankly doesn't matter what happens out here. At some point I sort of bought into that old spiritual paradigm that says, well, okay, if I really want to be spiritual, I have to give it all up and go get a rice bowl and cave and live in a mountainside, but I like good wine and beautiful women and, and other kind of cool things in life. And I said, isn't there a way that you can sort of, it's all sort of the same thing. Why not be able to experience and appreciate all of it and not give up any of it? So it's kind of like I wanted the whole game, both the inner and outer life, and to have those be able to match up. So figuring out what could I do that then can align with my outer world that was very much in alignment with the inner world. I know that all sounds pretty abstract and obtuse maybe to people listening to this, but a good example.
It's not for me.
A good example would be learning, for instance, that if you keep stuff in your head that you think you should do, need to do, might do, that's meaningful to you, and that's the only place you have it, it will become a very disturbance. It will become a disturbance to you because your head is not the place that manages that very well. Your mind is for having ideas, not for holding them. But most people are running their life by some sort of system that they're building inside their psyche. And then what happens is it totally distracts them from being able to focus on their real stuff. They'll be waked up at 3 o'clock in the morning with, oh, I need cat food, or I need to do the strategic plan, or I need to call Bob. And those are irrelevant things to be thinking about at 3 o'clock in the morning. You can't do anything about them. So there's a very inefficient part of your psyche that starts to get entangled in a lot of things that are not managed very well. Well, what does that have to do with your inner life? Well, if you try to sit down and be quiet so that you can listen to more of the subtler and more inner things and pay attention to your intuition. If you have all that other noise and static going on, that's very, very hard to do. So how do I shut up the noise? Now, if you quiet the noise, see, I figured out the algorithm about how do you shut up your mind. How do you stop it from thinking about cat food or your strategic plan or call Bob? Well, there's a very simple algorithm about how you get that out of your mind. The question is, which I don't really answer, that's the challenging question that my work then presents to you, is what would you do if you had nothing on your mind? What would you think about? And that's the clear space that I think that most people really want to have, that allows people to then flourish. So, finding keys that allowed people to free up their space wherever they are, at whatever level or horizon they're focused on. If I get more clear space, I'm able to then see higher, see at a bigger horizon, access that, have more ability to focus on that appropriately, as well as the ability to then be able to implement and execute on the decisions I make when I'm thinking there. I have clear space to be inspired, and once I get inspired, I'm going to create things I need to do and people I need to call and projects I want to do and business I want to create.
Yeah.
And I then need to be able to have a tool or mechanism to be able to then throw those things into the pot and have those then manifest. If I don't, some part of me will block that process.
Yeah,
because it knows, it says, hey David, you have a cool idea, but you didn't do anything with it. I'm going to stop your idea machine because I don't want to keep frustrating you.
You are explaining that when you have a lot of noise in your head, you can't connect to your intuition. What advice could you give me to manage this noise?
Well, you have to identify the noise first.
Yeah.
So that's why I write it down or capture or collect the things that have your attention. I need cat food. I need to get a life. I want to find God. I need to build a company. I need to call Jim. I need to get it all out. So all those things you need to get out, first of all, that's the first step, is to capture or collect things that have your attention. I need to identify those things. Second step, because you can't leave it there. If you left it there, now you're creating lists that are still stressful because there's still decisions about the bank or your mom or your
Yeah.
boss or the cat food or the business.
You
or
just see
whatever.
what you have to do.
Yeah, you see a lot of things that still require some more attention. Because the principle is, if you don't give appropriate attention to what has your attention, it will start to take more of your attention than it deserves. So if you don't give, I need cat food, the right attention, cat food will take up more psychic real estate than it should. Right? So what attention do I need to give to cat food, or bank, or doctor, or my mother, or any of that? So that then is the simple algorithm, but it's a very profound one. Stage 2, once I've identified those things that are pulling on me psychologically, then I need to decide what exactly do those mean to me and what am I going to do about them. In other words, is it something I'm committed to act on or not? Yes or no?
Yeah.
If it is, and by the way, if it's not, and we get a lot of things that pop into us, that come into our world, that there is no action required, for which case it is either trash or eliminate or recycle or delete, or stage for later assessment, incubate. I need to hold this, rethink it 2 weeks from now or 2 months from now, or I just need to file it as reference, which is something I might need access to. So you, as we say, toss it, tickle it for later assessment, or file it if there's no action. If there is action, 2 simple questions, but very profound.
Yeah,
what
I love
outcome am I committed to, if any, about this? What's the project? You get to mark mom off as done, or bank off as done, or doctor off as done when what's true. What's your project? What is your outcome? What are you committed to achieve? What are you going to finish? Making these videos. David, when are you finished with this? When what's true? Right? And that's the finish line that you need to also define, because that's a stake in the ground you need to put out there. Bang that in the ground, because the winds of life are going to blow you all over the place. If that was the only thing you had to do, it'd still be challenging. But you got about 45 of those, right? Including all the things in your personal life or everything else. So you better give yourself a nice stake in the ground called finish this video project, and here's what finish means, and I need to keep reminding myself of that consistently to say, what do I still need to do next to move the needle or to be able to check that off? So the second question, here's the outcome. What's the very next thing that would need to happen to start to move forward on that? And that's the what's the next action question, which is such a core, key element to how you get things done. In other words, the keys to getting things done is, what does done mean? And what does doing look like, and where would it happen? So you got this final thing on your video project here. You need to have that somewhere out there. And you need to decide how often do you need to look at that final outcome and assess where you are against that. Ooh, the delta, there's still a delta. I can't mark it off as done yet because something's not true yet. And then, of course, your question is, so what's the very next action you need to take to start moving toward completion? Is that a phone call? Is that an email? Is that a surf the web? Is that a draft a document? Is that something you're waiting on for Julia or somebody else to get back to you about? And you need to make sure you've defined those. Once you've defined outcome and action, and you park those someplace that you trust you'll see those at some appropriate place, guess what? Off your mind. Not finished, but off your mind. Because your mind will say, gee, David, you haven't quite finished appropriately engaging with your commitment yet until you've made these decisions and parked them someplace appropriate. So I just discovered this algorithm. It's not hard. It's not like some foreign language or some new technology. Everybody knows how to write things down. Everybody knows how to decide what's the outcome, what's the action step. Everybody knows how to keep lists. Everybody knows how to look at them on some regular basis. So these are not behaviors you don't know how to do. They're behaviors you have not orchestrated yet in a coherent way to make sure you can walk through your life with nothing on your mind except whatever's in front of you, so that you walk around in the presence, not having that some exceptional event. And I just figured out how you do that. What you do with that clear space is up to you.
Yeah. So I have to focus on what I want to do to achieve the outcome. For example, finish the video. And yeah, I would like to take the example of this tour.
Yeah.
My goal, when I come to United States, I had two goals. The first one is to do 30 interviews. The second one is to do 10 interviews with top leaders, okay? And to reach that, I have a lot of ways. And I can send emails to people to introduce me. I can send email by LinkedIn, by Twitter, by mail. I can go to the Universal Studio to reach people I would like to reach. And I think I have a lot of noise because I would like to do everything. I would like to contact not only 30 people, but maybe 200 people. And it is hard for me to accept that I have only 24 hours to sleep, eat, be with my girlfriend, work, emails, and I would love to do everything. And I think I have a lot of stress because I am not realist. Yeah, realistic. What do you think about that?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in terms of what you just said. First of all, let me ask you, are there things about this project that are not on your mind? Or things about your life that are not on your mind? Important, but they're not on your mind. They're not bugging you, they're not plaguing you, or they're not bothering you.
Yes, I see.
Why?
I don't know.
Well, you've probably decided that whatever about them is okay. That there's nothing that's going to, whatever needs to be done about them has either been decided or the results of those decisions have been parked someplace that you trust. Nothing will blow up, nothing will explode. So you said, here's what I'm not doing, and that's okay. Right?
Yeah.
So what do you need to do to get the rest of this project off your mind is exactly the same thing. What do you need to do to get off your mind about the 200 people you might want to do about this that you may not have time to do? Now, that may get a little subtle, but it's like, okay, David, what would you need to do to get this off your mind? You say, well, I need to look at all the possibilities. I need to look at how much time I have. I need to look at what I want to produce by what time. I need to say, those are, if they show up, that's cool. Here's the ones that are absolutely mission critical. Here are the ones that'd be nice to have if I could get them. Here are the ones that, be a great little bluebird if it landed on my shoulder, but I'm not going to go work on it. And you need to back off and take a look at your whole landscape and give yourself a map of what you're about and go, that's fine. You just haven't done that. You just got it all in your psyche. That's why it's trying to it will wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning about that stuff with nothing you can do anything about, because your psyche is not the place to do that. Your cognitive mind, your conscious mind, your intuition and your intelligence can manage that, but not when you've loaded all that inside your psyche. So you just need to create a bigger map and step back and say, what's the map I need to look at? Here's the someday maybes, here's the things I might want to do, here's the possibilities, here's where we are, and you deal.
Right.
And to some degree, you're just spoiled, you're just too young. You know, you want to know what the answer to that? Grow up. Right? You find out what you can't do. And you speed up by slowing down. You go, hey, you know, cool. You know, that's enough. That's sufficient. And not the damper. I don't want to put a damper on your enthusiasm, but a way to corral the enthusiasm. You know, one of the big champions of my work, a guy named Evan Taubenfeld, who's a rock guitarist. He was Avril Lavigne's guitarist, and he produces with Warner right now. And Evan said, look, before GTD, my methodology, he said, before getting things done, I started a lot of songs. He said, after getting things done, I finished a lot of songs. So there's a lot about just being able to get a grip on your creativity and to be able to identify and objectify and become more explicit with what your agreements with yourself and dreams and fantasies are. Fabulous. I've created my whole life out of fantasy. My life didn't exist. This job did not exist. I made it up, right? And then I just made it happen.
Yeah.
So I'm an absolutely firm believer that you give yourself the freedom to have the dreams, have the vision. But passion is highly overrated. I'm sorry. No, passion. The more passionate you are, the more depressed you'll get. Right? I'd rather be bored with what I'm saying and pick up one or two things that you just start to implement in the mundaneness of your life. That those things start to then create the ability for you to be able to then sort of raise the tide, not just have a stormy sea. Right? So you want the tide level to just raise up in your life. So finding what are the practices and the habits and behaviors that start to then elevate your ability to have a freer space inside, and to then free up your ability to make intuitive decisions about it. To me, you know, after 68 years, here's my advice to, you know, a 20-something from a 60-something, right?
Yeah.
It's just what you want to do is you want to raise the sea level. Don't worry about the storms. Now the storms, by the way, your passion will start to push up against your improvement opportunities and will start to give you directionality. You know, but the real direction will be, what do you still feel like doing when you don't feel like doing anything? You know, your system is only as good as what you're willing to still maintain when you feel like crap and have the flu. You don't feel like doing anything, because your system will be only as good as your weakest link. So that's why I say, you know, a lot of, you know, my advice to anybody would be, you know, especially people that say, take control of your own life. You know, what's different about what we teach as opposed to a lot of other trainings and other things out there is a lot of them start with what you should be thinking about, what you should do. We start with, where are you? What are you doing? And how could you get more control of that? Because if you get control of that, then that will allow you the freedom to elevate your focus to the next level of game that's not under control and get that under control.
Cool.
So if that makes sense.
Yeah. And in this topic, I have another question. Just before the interview, we were talking about working. And how do you manage your life between work, your wife, your dog?
Sure. Now you drove here, right, from Los Angeles?
Yeah.
Right? So there were lots of things you did in the car.
Yeah.
Right? So, and whoever drove, if Julia drove, right, you drove, but you were focusing on, sometimes I'm braking, sometimes I'm accelerating, sometimes I'm looking at the rearview mirror, sometimes I'm talking, sometimes I'm listening to the radio, how's the temperature in here, right? A lot of things are going on. And what did you do? I just said, well, what right now do I need to do to dynamically keep this thing all sort of managed appropriately? So it's really about appropriate engagement. How am I appropriately engaged with the traffic on this part of the freeway right now? How am I appropriately engaged with the person I'm sitting with in the car? How am I appropriately engaged with the temperature and my feeling in my body? So it really comes back to, are you appropriately engaged with your health? So here's the big secret. So don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Right. Getting things done.
Cut the video.
Right.
Sorry.
Getting things done is not about getting things done. It's about being appropriately engaged with your life and work. Because see, right now, you and I are not getting a lot of stuff done. Right? How many things am I not getting done sitting here talking to you? How many things are you not getting done?
Yeah.
But our ability to be present with each other in this conversation, for whatever this is about, is the degree to which we sense or feel or know that we are appropriately engaged with all the rest. Right? So appropriate engagement doesn't mean I'm doing those. It means I'm okay, I'm not doing those. But I need to know what those are. And I need to know a lot more consciously what those things represent to me. And I need to build in a much more sophisticated process to be able to analyze and evaluate. Believe me, before you showed up, I did a quick map about what else is going on in my life today, what else is going on in my life. And if you could look at my systems, it wouldn't take me more than 60 to 90 seconds to give you a very quick map of every single thing I might need to have on my awareness right now in terms of what I'm doing. And I just said, nah, you're it. I may have made a bad judgment. We'll see. Maybe this is the wrong thing to do this afternoon. Live and learn.
Yeah.
But in order to be able to do that, I had to be able to put all that to bed. But you can't do that by drinking or ignoring it or meditating. You have to do that by being engaged with it appropriately and then parking it. That'll wait. That's where that is. That's where that fits. So it's really about how do I manage all the different maps that I need to see, right? What's the map you need to see about tonight? What's the map you need to see about this week? What do you need to look at to feel comfortable how you're allocating your resources to finish this project? Well, you need a map about the project. You need a map about the rest of your life and that against this project. So back to your point, say, well, how much time do I spend in my health versus my work, whatever? So, well, do you have a map about all the aspects of your life that you think are critical to you? How's your health and vitality? How's your relationship? How's your spiritual life? How's your career development, by the way? How's your sense of service? How's your relationships? How's fun? How's your recreation factor? How's your personal creative expression factor? So you want to create a map? You got one. You have one internally. So I'm not making these things up. I'm not telling you should go. See, what I'm not telling you should set goals. You're talking to a lot of people. Go, you should set goals. You should be passionate. You should figure out your mission. I go, nah, forget it. Only pay attention to that if you need to pay attention to that to get that off your mind. So you've already got the map internally. This is all about how do you become just more conscious of what is.
Yeah,
right?
We have an unconscious map and just make it consciously.
Yeah, so just become more and more aware of why you're here and what you're doing. Now the strange thing about it is that getting things done is not about getting things done, it's about being appropriately engaged. However, if you are here on the planet to get things done, then you'd better be getting things done in order to be able to appropriately engage. So the strange thing is that a lot of people want to go be. I want to go be. Don't give me all that do stuff. I need to be. And I say, well, if you're in a world where doing is why you're here to be, you have to do in order to be. And the people that I know that are truly most into being are very high-level doers, very high level. So there seems to be something about that if you're, and the way we are engaged in the planet, the way we seem to be engaged in our life and work, is we seem to have something you can't stop, which is your intentionality. There is an intention inside of you. You can't stop that. It'll breathe you even when you're unconscious. There's something that says, there's something here to do, to express, to expand, to experience, or whatever. And I don't think you can stop that. Now, I can't prove that one to you. This is just an intuition, but I haven't been able to disprove it yet either. And if that's true, then some part of you needs to just listen internally. Wait a minute, what's got my attention right now? That's a fabulous mechanism, by the way. It's an elegant, oh my God, how phenomenal, how miraculous that you have a mechanism inside of you that actually has the temperature gauge about that inner map. And all you have to do is start to listen to what you want to do. One of the things I learned, David, over the years, if I could share this with anybody, is a lot of my agony was I wanted the perfect thing to do before I went to go do. And I think Seth, your conversation with Seth is like, look, just go start doing. If you're waiting to find out how to do before you start to do, you'll never figure out how to do.
Yeah, that's why I'm doing interviews in English, because I can't speak English with leaders.
Yeah. No, good for you. It's fabulous. So, and as you do, there's a ready, as we say, ready, fire, aim. Okay, let me go start to shoot and then quickly course correct based upon what happens as I start to engage. So starting to engage, so the advice I would give to people is like, what internally do you really want to be experiencing in life? What's your most fabulous fantasy? Somebody asked me that question years ago, and it was a
That's
really
why you asked me
Yeah.
the kind of question before.
well, it was a phenomenal experience for me when people said, "What am I really after?" And I was willing to, it was embarrassing, but he was a dear friend, and I said, "Well, from the time I was a little kid, I wanted to be president of the United States." And he asked me a very profound question. He said, "Why?" And I thought I had to think. I said, "Why?" Because you gave me an answer like, well, my ego wants to be out there, and would love to have the audience, have a large audience with this stuff. And the truthful answer inside of me was, I want people's attention. And I wanted to be able to not only have people's attention, but have people's attention that was a positively directed toward me, so that I could then provide them, huge value. But I didn't really understand that. But I had to be willing to be embarrassed to fess up to the fantasy, but then look inside what was the core essence of what I thought that fantasy would give me as an experience. And he said, "Well, David, how could you get that right away?" And I went, "Oh my God, I got it." And from that moment forward, I never had a question. It was always, okay, now I'm on a path to more and more do things of value and create the opportunity to get people's attention. In some way, in that way. So I think being willing to sort of the dichotomy or the paradox that says, be willing to acknowledge your fantasy and then be willing to get very real and immediate about things you can start to do toward what the essence of that fantasy would give you.
Yeah.
And that's a master key.
And I love this master key. And I have a question for you about that.
Sure.
One of my goals is to build a 1-year school, okay, for youth at the age of 18 years old, or between 16 or 20, I don't know, but in France the baccalaureate is 18, so that's why 18 years old. Because I find a lot of youth lost doing big studies and they don't know why. Me too, I was a computing engineer and I didn't know why. And I would like to build a 1-year program about the foundation of the life, the foundation of the communication, the foundation of success. According to you, what I have to do in this program to help the youth to find this master key?
It's that simple. Say, keep track of your fantasies. And then ask yourself, what experience do you think that fantasy, if that came true, would give you that you don't have yet?
So
and then say, and what could you do within a realistic framework right now that could start to give you more of what that experience is? It's really that simple. You don't have to go get much more complicated than that.
So according to you, I only have to ask them that.
Sure. Well, my ultimate question is, what's got your attention? If your mind is not totally empty, except than what you're doing, then I would just say, what's still in there that you have not processed or dealt with yet? Because another big enlightenment moment that I had in my life was realizing that somehow in this and potentially a million other lifetimes, I've created a whole lot more, things than I could ever finish or fulfill. So I don't need to worry about how much more creative I need to be. I just need to be aware of what's showing up in front of me and finish it with completion and elegance so that then the next thing is allowed to show up. Now that may just be for my own personal path. I don't know that that's true for everybody. I know it wouldn't hurt anybody to just look around and say, what's incomplete in your life, what's still got your attention? Why don't you just finish that up, close that up, do that with as much elegance and excellence as you can, and then watch what space that will open up for the next thing that's coming toward you. Because I think everybody's got a huge raft of opportunities coming toward them, and it's not about those are not available, you're not available to them.
So you are saying that when you finish the things you began, new opportunities come.
Exactly.
Cool.
And you actually don't have to finish them. A way to finish them may be to look at it and go, that's enough. I have a 2.2 year span for hobbies. I discovered over all these 68 years, about 2 years I was in bonsai, 2 years I was a sailor, 2 years Actually, 4 years I was in karate. 2 years I studied the flute.
Wow.
And I just discussed, there's a lot of things. Now that's just me. I'm a sort of jack of all hobbies, as we might say. But I discovered those were enough. Did I get to be an excellent person in any one of those? No. But I just got enough.
But in your head, it's okay. Done.
In my head,
it's done.
Okay, it's done.
Right. Okay.
So looking at what you're doing and saying, do I want that as something I want to accomplish or experience? Have I done that yet? And if not, then that's part of your work to do.
And maybe do I need to do a perfect video now?
Yeah.
It could be the question.
Yeah. Well, you would have to decide what's enough. Every artist does. Right?
Yeah.
There's always more you could do.
Every chef too.
But at some point you will overdo it.
Yeah.
But then that's an intuitive, judgment. There's no theoretical formula for that. And it all comes back to, David, let me look at the map. Is the video where it needs to be? Is my relationships where they need to be? Is my fun factor? And to be able to step back and sort of take a look at your life from a more objective or a more explicit standpoint, instead of being wrapped up in it and then being run by it. So that's all I did, was figure out how to loosen the knots and the strings that somehow we create around ourselves. Just unhook from those and step back and say, okay, now I'm going to go play with the dog. Now I'm going to work on the video. Now I'm going to do this. But there's no way I could manage that appropriately and be present with each one and not be disturbed by anything else unless I had these external maps. I haven't found a way to do that.
What do you think about the fact we do simultaneously? Do you understand what I mean? For example, for the same project, not 3 projects, for the same project, doing answering mails and in the same time doing another task, in the same time doing another task.
You can't do them at the same time. You can switch rapidly.
Yeah.
And whether switching rapidly is efficient, because I'm on hold on the phone, why not process 6 things? If you're waiting for Air France to get on the line with you so you can book your plane, why waste 6 minutes? Why not use 6 minutes to dump out a bunch of emails and process a bunch of other stuff? They come back on the line, stop that, come back to what you're doing. That's great. Thank goodness we have the ability to be able to switch the things we're doing there rapidly. Yeah. If you can hear it, I don't know if you can hear this, but my dog is snoring. Yeah. Anyway, so I love the fact that I have the ability to be able to switch back and forth between lots of different things so that I don't lose and waste a bunch of sort of little windows of time, that I could move a lot of things forward that don't require a lot of mental horsepower, don't require a lot of thought. So that's really powerful. The problem is if I go, I want to work on this, and then I get interrupted or I suddenly get distracted about that, and then I go over there, but I haven't left a placeholder for this that I trust I'll get back to appropriately, then a part of me brings that with me to that. And now I'm starting to be in stress, because now I'm trying to deal with something, but there's something else that's still running around in my psyche. So the ability to have placeholders for things, it's like a martial artist that when they fight 4 people at once, they don't fight 4 people at once. It's that person, then that person, then that person, then that person. And basically, they're fighting one person at a time, but they're just leaving that one, scanning the whole horizon, focusing here, scanning the whole horizon, focusing here. So there's no residue going from one to the other. There's just a constant, in the military they call it situational awareness. There's a constant sense of the environment. But I'm not being pulled because of one thing because I left it, going over here. I didn't bring that with me. Most people do, however, because they don't trust, hey, let me write a note and throw that in my own in basket. So I trust that will then trigger that vector again. If you don't have a good placeholder, like taking notes that will then be a trigger and remind you of what you were doing and go to do other things, now the brain is now then going to try to multitask, which it actually can't do. You can't give conscious, focused attention on more than one thing at a time. You can do a lot more than one thing at a time. You're breathing and you're pumping blood, and when you drive and you're talking to other people, you're doing a lot of things all at one time because those are habitual. So there doesn't need to be a conscious focus on that. Those are built in terms of sort of the system, the systemic processes and responses. And you can do a lot of those things at the same time. But I can't focus on answering this email and focus on talking to this person that walked in the door at the same time. Impossible. But when you try to do those, then some part of you feels in stress, and you actually then you're trying to talk to the person, but you're not there. You're trying to deal with the email, but you're not there. And now you're being ineffective about either one.
Yeah.